Hello and welcome to our session, which is a discussion on the career paths in pro bono and corporate responsibility. My name is Sarah Morton-Ramwell and I'm the Global Pro Bono and Corporate Responsibility Partner at Ashurst. Ashurst is a leading global commercial law firm, and today I'm joined by my colleagues Claire and Ella.
Hi, I'm Claire Fourel. I'm a Senior Associate in the Global Pro Bono Practice and I manage our Pro Bono practice for Europe and the Middle East.
Hi, I'm Ella Blakesley. I'm the Corporate Responsibility Manager at Ashurst for Europe, the Middle East and the US.
And before we begin our discussion, maybe just some background about what pro bono and corporate responsibility is. Pro bono is essentially legal services free of charge to marginalised and disadvantaged people of limited means, the not-for-profits or social enterprises that support those people, or legal services that are free for issues of big public concern or broad community concern. At Ashurst we see that as a standalone legal practice. And corporate responsibility works very closely but is separate to pro bono. It's a very big engagement program and it looks at things like non-legal volunteering and fundraising, the environment, business community leadership, and in Australia reconciliation as well. So we're going to begin our discussion. Claire, tell us, how did you get into this role? What's your career path to date?
So I started off as a trainee lawyer at Ashurst and then qualified into the European and Competition Law Department, and I ended up practicing for 3 years. I then went to do a master's in international development in London, and simultaneously I was working part-time as a pro bono manager in London. So Ashurst was merging with an Australian firm which had a very large pro bono practice, whereas in the UK this was something that was yet to be developed.
Great. And Ella, how about you? Corporate responsibility is a slightly different role, so you're not a lawyer. Tell us about your career path and how you ended up in corporate responsibility.
Sure. So I started off actually in a career in human resources and specifically working for another law firm in graduate recruitment. I love working with people and so HR initially was a career that really appealed to me. Over time, whilst working at Reed Smith, this other law firm, I became very involved in volunteering myself, getting involved in many of the different programmes that were available, but in particular a programme called Prime, which is a legal work experience programme aimed at young people at secondary school from disadvantaged backgrounds. And I felt very inspired by working on this particular programme and really loved it. It was then that I decided to consider a career in corporate responsibility, and over time I was lucky enough to move over into that department, initially starting on a part-time basis and then moving on eventually to a full-time role.
Great. Well, and I've worked with Ella before at Reed Smith, but also very closely with Claire before I started at Ashurst. I always knew I wanted to be a human rights lawyer, probably from when I was in high school. So when I went to university, I did an arts law degree, and I really focused on women's rights, gender rights, and reproductive rights, which is sort of pro-choice rights. And I started my career in a not-for-profit, and that was initially where I saw myself. I worked at the Centre of Reproductive Rights in New York as an intern. I then, through that role, moved to the UK and worked in the advocacy team, doing a lot of communications and advocacy at International Planned Parenthood in London. And I really loved what I was doing substantively, but I also felt that I wasn't doing legal work. I really wanted to do legal advocacy. So I thought that I really needed to improve my legal skills. I was a qualified lawyer at that time. So I thought the best way to do that would be to do a training contract. So that would be a way I could do several different seats, get a lot of different skills. So I went to Freshfields and I did a 2-year training contract there. And during that experience, it was where I first learnt about pro bono. And I was very taken by the concept. I really felt that that was a perfect match for me. So I did a pro bono secondment to Liberty, which is a human rights organisation. I loved that so much. I then started to talk to the pro bono team there and say, look, I really think I should qualify into your group. Please, if there's any way that I can join your group, can we make it happen? So I actually joined them initially by a secondment and then got a role in pro bono. And it was from there I moved to Reed Smith to do a wider pro bono role, but also a corporate responsibility role. And while you both do sort of your individual areas, I do both and have done both throughout my whole career. And you see a mixture of that, I think, in the sector of people doing both or sort of one specialisation. So I did that for over 5 years before I took on the role at Ashurst. At Ashurst, we're very lucky. We have we have 5 full-time lawyers and 2 corporate responsibility managers. So we have a very big team, and we work in 25 offices in 15 countries. And so that's been sort of my career path to date. Ella, may I ask, what sort of skills do you think you need for someone who'd be interested in corporate responsibility, and what are the skills that you use most in your job?
I think first and foremost, one of the most important skills and attributes is to have a passion and enthusiasm for supporting and working with people in need, working with charities, the voluntary sector. I think that is absolutely the most important thing. I think in addition, it's essential to be able to work with people, to have really good communication skills, to show empathy, and to be able to adapt your communication style based on who you're working with. Mm-hmm. In my role, I play the in-between person between the voluntary sector, working with charities and schools, mm-hmm. and also people at Ashurst. So it's really important that I can work with both groups of people effectively. Otherwise, I think organisation is key. I'm juggling multiple projects. I'm working with lots of charities. I'm trying to get people at Ashurst involved in volunteering. I need to be organised and efficient.
And you're now a manager. Have you found that the skill set that you need has changed, perhaps from when you were working in corporate responsibility before you became a manager?
I think to an extent there's definitely been changes. I think the budget management is probably one of the most significant, but also working hard and having more responsibility for engaging senior people at Ashurst, and having an overall responsibility to ensure that all the programmes that are running really well for all key stakeholders.
Great. And Claire, how about you? What are the kind of things that you do in your role and the skills that you need for someone who would be a pro bono manager in a similar role?
I think similarly to Ella, I think that having a passion for social justice and assisting marginalised individuals, matters of public interest is absolutely key, because otherwise you could just be doing any legal role within a law firm. I think that having technical legal skills, having an understand of what legal services we can offer to individuals or to not-for-profits or social enterprises is very important, because it allows you to actually structure projects. I think working with people and a wide variety of people at that, ranging from lawyers to external clients to partners within a law firm to the business development function, is absolutely essential. And I also think that practice management skills are also very important. So, for example, managing the budget, communicating externally about what we are doing, communicating with clients about what we're doing. It really requires a very wide range of management skills.
And do you do legal work in your role as a pro bono manager?
I do. I manage a couple of clinics, so I go to a legal advice centre and oversee trainee work. I also do research and advice relating to, for example, issues on sustainable development, and I also do individual casework, particularly relating to refugees.
Great. And for me, I think my skill set and the skills that you need have changed as I've sort of progressed in my career. I think as you become more senior, and certainly at a partner level, a huge amount of management skills need to come into play in addition to the legal skills that you have. But I echo your words. More widely, I think when I look at people who I would want to hire, the most important thing to me is a really genuine and demonstrable passion for social justice. That is something that can't be taught. That is something that is inherent in people, and I think is probably the thing I look most for when I'm recruiting. And I do think there's a lot of different then skills that can be learnt on the job, and that there are certainly base skills that people need, but that passion is really important. But I would also echo that passion for social justice, there's a huge amount of jobs that you can get. So for lawyers, for example, you could be working in legal aid or legal community advice centres, or in-house in charities, or in the big pro bono brokerages. So there's a lot of options for social justice, and the same with corporate responsibility as well. There's lots of different roles that you could have in companies, or in sort of more account management in not-for-profits. So I think in addition to that passion for social justice, commercial awareness is really essential for my role, and I see this in your roles as well. And a really appreciation and passion for how partnerships run. They are different to sort of different corporates or organisations. And for me, having spent time in a not-for-profit but also as a fee earner, I think pro bono was the marriage of the two skill sets, the two types of cultures that I really, really loved. So I think that that's important for people considering if they want a career in social justice, whether they want to be in a law firm. Do you think that rings true?
I think that's right, because I think law firms are commercial entities, and having an understanding of how you can leverage the skills of thousands of lawyers across a very wide geographic network is very important. But I think you need to consider whether you want to have a hybrid private sector, third sector role, or whether actually going to an NGO is something that would be better suited to you. And I think everyone is different. There's no right answer.
And Ella, do you see commercial awareness playing out in the role that you do?
Yeah, I think so. I think actually linked with that, it's really important to understand challenges that the charitable sector face. If we don't have an awareness of what's going on in the wider business sense, in terms of the role that the government plays, I think we won't be able to do our jobs as effectively. So I think an understanding of the challenges that charities face is key.
And I find, so at Ashurst, because pro bono is a practice group, I'm like any practice group leader, I need to really understand what's happening with the firm, with our lawyers, with our commercial clients. And while the inherent intrinsic value in doing pro bono and corporate responsibility, and for pro bono the ethical and professional responsibility, there's also a real business case for getting involved in pro bono and corporate responsibility, including recruitment of the best people, and young people really care about these issues. And Ella, you've been in graduate recruitment. Do you see that more? You've seen that more and more, that young people care about these issues?
Yeah, absolutely. And thinking about our trainee solicitor population, there's a real high level of engagement in the corporate responsibility programme. And in addition, research is really showing that millennials increasingly will make decisions of which company, which law firm, which organisation to join based on how responsible they see that organisation to be. So it's really important.
So that's a great reason why businesses get involved. And then I think that plays on to sort of the retention and the engagement of staff. And then, of course, learning development, particularly for support teams in corporate responsibility and the legal teams for pro bono. And then, of course, we all work very closely with our commercial clients, and it's a great way to share value. So I think in my role, having not only a very core passion for social justice, which we all have, but also a real appreciation of how a firm works and an understanding of the commercial realities and the business benefits of what we do. And then what you mentioned, I think my role has a lot of sort of the more general management, which we've talked about, which is a lot of communication, internal comms and external comms, I think are really important to engage people in the program and to make sure that people know what they can get involved in. A lot of budgets, and for me, running a large team, sort of the human resources issues that arise from time to time. I also think there's a lot of, for my role, a lot of strategy development and implementation. So in some ways you are a practice group leader, but you're also almost running a mini business or a mini not-for-profit within a firm. So you have your own strategy, which has to align closely with the business strategy, but you need to know where you're going and how pro bono and corporate responsibility can be holistically supportive of each other. So lots of different skills, and of course the legal skills. I find as people get more senior in pro bono roles, they do a little bit less legal work. I still think it's really important to do the legal work, and so what I find the legal work that I tend to do will be where there's not another appropriate partner. So where we have our lawyers doing work that might be within their skill set, so corporate lawyers doing governance work or reviewing contracts, it makes sense to have a corporate partner reviewing. But we also do lots of human rights research projects, cross-border projects, so those are the kind of projects that I get involved in. But because our practice has a huge focus on individuals, I also make sure that I am going out to the clinics like you mentioned and doing that work, because it's really important that I can still have contact with those who are most marginalised and disadvantaged. Talking then more widely about how people can get into these types of roles, Claire, do you have thoughts on sort of tips for someone who might want to make a transition into pro bono, or perhaps is a junior lawyer who might want to make a career in pro bono at some point?
I mean, when I was a trainee lawyer and then as a solicitor, I did a lot of pro bono work myself, and I think there's no substitute for actually going out and creating your own opportunities. So we didn't really have a formalised pro bono practice at Ashurst, but I wanted to work with certain charities that were particularly close to my heart, and I went out and brought them in as clients to the firm. So in that sense, I created my own opportunities. And then when I went off to do my master's, and I wanted to get more of a specialism in international developments, so that could complement my legal background. You know, again, that was going out to actually learn more about that space, and that's actually how the role at Ashurst came about. So I think it's about being alive to opportunities, but if they're not there, to actually create them yourself.
Absolutely. And what would you suggest for people who are interested in either lawyers or non-lawyers in doing corporate responsibility, either at a firm or perhaps more widely?
Yeah, so the beauty and the challenge about corporate responsibility is that there's really no set career path.
Yeah.
I didn't know that corporate responsibility existed when I was at school, at university. It's a career that I discovered based on following my interests and my passions. So I would suggest, doing some research. You know, there are more and more junior roles being created in corporate responsibility. Teams are starting to grow as the business case for corporate responsibility and sustainability roles develops. But in addition, I think other careers such as human resources, marketing, communications. In my role, I do a lot of work on internal, external communications, so I think those skill sets work well. But otherwise, as Claire said, playing an active role in volunteering, whether that's within an organisation that you may have started working at, whether that's with charities directly, creating your own opportunities, again, as Claire said, I think that's crucial. And then, it's always worked well for me. Follow your passions, follow your interests. Meet with people. There are lots of people in big organisations now that do corporate responsibility roles. Meet for a coffee with them. Find out more about how they got into their career paths. Over time, I suspect there may well be more of a set career path. There are degrees available now focused on sustainability, corporate responsibility. So it's an emerging sector, and over time, a more set career path will follow.
I mean, I agree. I didn't know about pro bono or corporate responsibility when I was going through university and really finding my first job. I really just knew that I wanted to work in social justice, and I wanted to assist those that were really in a challenging situation, and then slowly emerged to understand pro bono more widely, and more widely corporate responsibility. So I think my advice is probably to, you know inherently if you want a career in social justice, and then I think it's about then considering opportunities as they arise, because you're right, it's an emerging sector. More and more opportunities are coming up over time, but there is no set career path for the moment. It still is, it's a much smaller group of people who do that. And I think you need to know yourself. You need to know, as we discussed before, do you have a real interest in law firms and commerciality or organisations? And perhaps an in-house role is something that suits you. If not, and you really want to do sort of the advocacy and work like that, perhaps being in a not-for-profit or working for legal aid is a more appropriate avenue. But people move in between. I mean, I went from not-for-profit to Fiona to sort of the hybrid role that we have now. I look at our team, and we have people that came from not-for-profits as well as people who spent many years as lawyers who then moved across to do pro bono, and yourself who was in a business already in a human resources role. And I agree, marketing is also a very similar role that could lend itself to corporate responsibility internally. But I think you're right, the proof is in the pudding. It's about showing whatever you're doing that you care about social justice. So doing a lot of pro bono work if you're a lawyer, or volunteering if you're a non-lawyer, throughout university if you can. I think you create your own opportunities. When I first got my first role at the Centre for Reproductive Rights, there actually wasn't a role over that time. They only did internships over the summer period, and with my visa I couldn't do that. And so I would ring them, I would email them, I would just tell them how much I cared about the issues and how impressed I was with the organisation. And I think it was the persistence that they eventually sort of said, okay, we'll create something bespoke for you. And certainly I know when I see people who are passionate, you do want to go up above and beyond to help create something for them. So I think be persistent, and don't be afraid of opportunities that aren't, here's the full package, the full job. Because it is an emerging sector. As you mentioned, you started part-time, you also did part-time. My first role was a parental leave cover, which was also part-time, it's 3 days a week. So often these roles grow because of parental leave, or perhaps they start a 1 or 2 or 3 day roles that then you can build a business case and you become full-time. So I think people shouldn't be scared off by that. Do you agree with that advice?
Yeah, I think you never know how you will end up somewhere. You know, I think more and more, very few people stay in one job for life, and there's a lot of moving sideways. So, for example, I started off as a commercial lawyer. I then left and went and did a master's. I got this part-time role, but I was also doing consultancy work for a not-for-profit organisation as well. And it took 3 years for me to actually get a full-time role and join the team full-time. So I think it's really important to be alive to flexibility and to opportunity.
And you mentioned a master's. Do you think that's something that's useful? Was that useful for you? What would you suggest in that sphere?
I think a master's is not essential, but I think for me it was very, very useful. I think that having been a lawyer, I think it was really important to actually get an understanding in international development issues. But having said that, I don't think it is essential. I just think that it makes you reflect in a way on an industry and also on issues in a way that you wouldn't necessarily without a master's.
I mean, I agree, and when I look at people, and if I was hiring, a master's is certainly not essential, and my view is don't perhaps do the master's because you're not quite sure yet what you want to do. My view is perhaps wait till you've got a more set idea, then learn more about what the interest area or where you're going. I did my master's much sort of further on in my career, and I did one in sustainability leadership at Cambridge, and the thesis was very tailored to pro bono. So at that point I was doing pro bono within a very large firm, so I could really tailor the learning to day to day what I wanted to do. But I do think that you're right, it is something that can help you sort of reflect more widely, but that people, I don't think, need to worry if they don't have them. They can always get them further along in their career.
I mean, I think certainly for pro bono, that's not necessarily essential, but I think if you are thinking about a career, for example, with a big NGO, with a big INGO, particularly the UN World Bank, a master's would be very important for that.
I agree. And Ella, I know that you're a member of the Institute of Corporate Responsibility and Sustainability, so that is essentially a fairly new body that is aiming to really professionalise corporate responsibility so that it's not seen as more of an ad hoc career path, but a real profession as is the legal profession and other professions. Do you think joining up as sort of a junior student or someone quite junior in the career, do you think that's quite helpful?
Yeah, no, I definitely encourage membership of the ICRS. They are doing lots of work to champion corporate responsibility and sustainability by hosting forums, by hosting networking events, by leading seminars. So it's a really great way to meet others that are either in the sector currently or interested in getting into the sector, but also to develop learning. And there's so many opportunities that, I'd highly recommend it.
I think they've been a fantastic step because we've all seen in our own careers just how much this area has changed and developed in recent years, and I think that's a step to sort of really professionalise corporate responsibility as a profession. If you're a junior person and you're thinking, how can I sort of dip my toe in, look at ICRS, so Institute of Corporate Responsibility and Sustainability. Claire, I know Advocates for International Development, so A4ID, also does training for junior lawyers, so students and things like that. Do you think those kind of training and courses and things like that are quite helpful for students to do?
I think they definitely are. In fact, it was I actually did the Advocates for International Development Law and Development Training Programme, which is actually one of the reasons why I decided to do a master's in international development, and that actually pushed me towards the career path that I'm in today. And I think there are lots of free courses around on human rights, on sustainability that are available on the internet. So, of course there are paying courses as well, but there's just such a wide variety of courses and learning that are available today. It's really important to take advantage of those.
I agree, and I think if for nothing else it helps people understand the issues, it helps them clarify which area they might want to be in. They might be more inclined to do environmental sustainability, or they are wanting to do more the legal work or the non-legal volunteering side. So I think that helps them know themselves as well as the sector. And I mean, we mentioned before, of course, pairing that with practical experience. So volunteering at university, or if you're already in a firm or organisation in the programs, because that's really demonstrating and truly living out the sort of the values that you want to continue and do more of. I think probably as a final question, what's your favourite part of the role that you have? So what do you think is the best part of being a corporate responsibility manager?
I love the variety. I love working with people, different people. I love working with charities. I love the work that I do with schools. But I also find it really rewarding to engage people at Ashurst in volunteering, to get them away from their desks, to see them in a different way, to allow them to share their skills with those and inspire the next generation if it's working with young people, or support communities that are less advantaged. That's the most rewarding part of my job.
And how about you, Claire? What do you think is the most rewarding part of being a pro bono manager?
So I think similarly to Ella, I love the variety. You get to work with such a different number of charities and social enterprises, and also individuals when we're doing clinic work. And I love learning about new issues. You know, there are so many different areas of social justice, and even from, you know, that can be from a practical sense or from a theoretical perspective. There's always new ways of perceiving the world and understanding it. And I love you know, getting a good outcome for example, a vulnerable individual. You might be helping a refugee child be successful with a family reunion case, and that is something that's incredibly rewarding.
I agree, and I think the things that I love the most about my role and the career that I've had in pro bono corporate responsibility to date is the fact that you can work with individuals in need and do something tangible, either non-legal or legal, to improve their lives so that they know that they're valued and cared for. It gives you a huge sense of happiness, and it's wonderful to be able to facilitate that for others within the firm. But at the same time, I think what's wonderful about the roles like ours is that we can also work with not-for-profits and look from a sort of bird's eye view at the more systemic level and see what advocacy is needed, what legal cases are needed to try and change it at a systemic level. So I do love that combination of sort of really grassroots, on-the-ground work, but also systemic and theoretical and partnership work to do sort of mass change. Another great privilege is working with wonderful people like yourselves. I absolutely think we have such a wonderful team, but also working with just passionate social justice champions internally within the firm, and certainly we're very lucky with our management, but also externally, you know, some of the smartest and most inspiring people we get to deal with day to day. So I think it's a really rewarding career. I encourage the people who are listening to consider careers in pro bono and corporate responsibility. Do you have any final thoughts before we wrap up, or any other advice you'd like to give?
I think just to add really that what's fantastic about both CR and pro bono across the legal sector and other sectors too is the collaborative nature.
Yes.
We're working with each other to have a greater impact, to support communities as a whole, and I think that's different, you know, compared to other career areas where perhaps, you know, in HR, graduate recruitment, you might be competing for top talent. We work together, and that's refreshing and also really important.
I think the sort of the collaboration point is a really good one, and I think also we do something that is really innovative. Traditionally, the third sector or the public sector has been the ones to actually address social issues, and actually corporate partnerships between the public sector, third sector, and the private sector, such as law firms, is something that is really novel, and it's just something very exciting to be able to leverage and develop.
Thank you, Claire, and thank you both for your time today. I do hope this has been helpful for those of you who are considering a career in pro bono or corporate responsibility, or in social justice more widely. I think the key points from today is that there isn't really a set career path. There's lots of different avenues into a career in corporate responsibility or pro bono, but don't let that put you off. Be proactive, create your opportunities. Don't worry about taking short-term opportunities such as secondments or part-time work, because often it's about proving the business case, proving that you are adding value, and then these become longer-term roles. So we wish you well in your career paths, and we hope you find this session useful. Thank you.
Thank you.